Following his gold medal triumph at the 1988 Olympic Games in Seoul, where he famously defeated Riddick Bowe in the super heavyweight final, Lennox Lewis made the decision to turn professional. With his towering 6-foot 5-inch frame, powerful jab, and calculated ring IQ, Lewis entered the professional ranks carrying not only the hopes of British boxing, but also the expectations of becoming the next dominant force in the heavyweight division. From the very beginning, Lewis made a statement, dismantling opponents with ease, showcasing both knockout power and technical skill. Unlike many heavyweights of his era, he combined patience with precision, using his jab as a weapon to control fights before unleashing thunderous right hands that ended them. His rise would set him on a path to face the very best heavyweights of the 1990s and early 2000s, from Razor Ruddock and Frank Bruno to Evander Holyfield, and eventually, Mike Tyson. This is the complete story of Lennox Lewis's professional boxing career. Fight by fight, knockout by knockout. From his debut in 1989 to his final championship defense in 2003, when he walked away as the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. Fight 1, June 27, 1989. Lennox Lewis versus Al Malcolm. Fresh off his Olympic triumph in Seoul, Lennox Lewis made his professional debut on June 27, 1989, in London, England. His opponent was Al Malcolm, a journeyman with a record of 11 wins, 12 losses, and 1 draw, brought in to provide Lewis with his first test in the paid ranks. The fight ended in bizarre circumstances. In the second round, Lewis snapped out a stiff left jab that only seemed to graze Malcolm around the eye. To the surprise of the crowd, Malcolm immediately went down and did not beat the referee's count. The result went into the books as a second-round knockout victory for Lewis, though many questioned the manner in which the fight ended. Still, it was a winning start. Lewis had his hand raised and began his professional journey 1-0, taking the first step toward what would become one of the greatest careers in heavyweight history. Fight 2, July 21st, 1989. Lennox Lewis versus Bruce Johnson. Just 3 weeks after his professional debut, Lennox Lewis crossed the Atlantic to showcase his talent in the United States. On July 21st, 1989, in Atlantic City, Lewis faced Bruce Johnson, a tough but limited opponent with a record of 5 wins, 10 losses, and 1 draw. Lewis imposed himself from the opening bell, using his long reach and stiff jab to control the range. In the second round, Lewis unleashed a chopping right hand that staggered Johnson badly. The referee quickly stepped in to wave off the contest, awarding Lewis a TKO victory. It was another confident step in his early career, moving his record to 2-0 with 2 knockouts, and showing American audiences the same blend of size, power, and skill that had made him an Olympic gold medalist the year before. Fight 3, September 25th, 1989. Lennox Lewis versus Andrew Gerard. Lennox Lewis returned home to London for his third professional bout on September 25th, 1989, facing seasoned journeyman Andrew Gerard. Gerard brought with him plenty of ring experience, though his record of 10 wins, 30 losses, and 5 draws showed he had often been used as a test for up-and-coming fighters. Lewis once again showed the composure and patience that was becoming his trademark. He worked behind his long jab, steadily wearing Gerard down and setting up openings for his heavier punches. By the 4th round, Lewis turned up the pressure, unleashing a barrage of clean shots that left Gerard unable to defend himself. The referee had no choice but to step in, awarding Lewis a TKO victory. The win not only moved Lewis to 3-0 with 3 knockouts, but also handed Gerard the 4th stoppage defeat of his career. It was another sign that the young heavyweight prospect was quickly making a name for himself in the paid ranks. Fight 4, October 10th, 1989. Lennox Lewis versus Steve Garber. Just 2 weeks after his third professional outing, Lennox Lewis stepped into the ring again, this time in Hull, to face Steve Garber. Garber, with a respectable record of 13 wins, 10 defeats and 1 draw, was regarded as a durable opponent who could ask questions of an emerging heavyweight prospect. Unfortunately, no fight footage of this bout is available, but the outcome was emphatic. Lewis wasted no time in establishing his dominance, using his size and power to overwhelm Garber from the opening bell. Within the first round, Lewis connected with a crushing shot that ended the contest almost as quickly as it had begun, securing his fourth straight professional victory by knockout. The win pushed Lewis's record to 4-0, all by stoppage, and furthered the growing sense that Britain had a future world heavyweight contender in the making. Fight 5. November 5, 1989. Lennox Lewis versus Melvin Epps. Back in London just under a month after his last bout, Lennox Lewis faced American journeyman Melvin Epps. Epps entered the fight with plenty of experience, holding a record of 14 wins, 19 losses, and 1 draw. While not a top contender, he was expected to at least test Lewis with his veteran savvy and ring know-how. The contest, however, turned into one of the more unusual episodes in Lewis's early career. After a competitive opening, the fight was abruptly cut short in the second round, when Epps was disqualified for failing to obey the referee's instructions. The bizarre ending handed Lewis his 5th straight professional win, though it was the first time in his career that victory hadn't come via knockout or technical knockout. Despite the anticlimactic conclusion, Lewis's perfect record continued, moving him to 5-0 and keeping his momentum rolling in the professional ranks. Fight 6, December 18, 1989. Lennox Lewis versus Greg Gorell. Lennox Lewis closed out his debut year as a professional with his 6th fight, taking on Greg Gorell in Kitchener, Ontario, Canada. For Lewis, Canada wasn't just another stop on the circuit. It was where he had grown up after moving there from England as a child, and where he had first risen to prominence in the amateur ranks. It was also the country he represented when he captured the gold medal at the 1988 Seoul Olympics. Fighting in Canada carried a sense of homecoming and added significance to his early career. Greg Gorell entered the bout with a solid professional record of 21 wins and 7 losses, making him one of the more seasoned opponents Lewis had faced to that point. Gorell's experience was expected to test Lewis's composure and ability to break down a durable fighter. Lewis methodically controlled the fight, working behind his jab and using his physical advantages to wear Gorell down. By the 5th round, Lewis unleashed a brutal and calculated barrage of punches that overwhelmed his opponent. The referee stepped in to halt the contest, awarding Lewis a 5th round TKO victory. The win capped off a perfect year for Lewis, who finished 1989 with a professional record of 6-0, all but one victory coming by knockout. It was a statement that the Olympic gold medalist was transitioning smoothly into the professional heavyweight ranks, and was beginning to build real momentum toward bigger challenges ahead. 1990 was a breakout year for Lennox Lewis. No longer just a promising Olympic gold medalist, Lewis stayed incredibly active with 8 fights across the year, showcasing his devastating power, improving ring craft, and rapid rise through the heavyweight ranks. By the end of 1990, his unbeaten streak and impressive performances earned him a shot at the European heavyweight title, a pivotal moment that marked his transition from rising prospect to legitimate contender. Fight 7, 31st of January 1990 versus Noel Quarles. Lennox Lewis opened 1990 at the historic York Hall in Bethnal Green, facing Liverpool's Noel Quarles, a durable veteran with a record of 19 wins and 11 defeats. Quarles was no stranger to tough opposition, but Lewis quickly showed the gulf in class. Using his jab to establish control, Lewis began breaking Quarles down before unleashing a furious barrage of punches in the 2nd round. The assault culminated in a big right hand that sealed the contest, forcing the referee to step in and call a halt. It was another emphatic win that highlighted Lewis's growing reputation as one of the heavyweight division's most dangerous prospects. Fight 8, 22nd, March 1990 versus Calvin Jones. Lewis's next outing came at the Gateshead Leisure Center against American heavyweight Calvin Jones, who entered the ring with a respectable record of 13 wins and 4 losses. Despite Jones's experience, Lewis wasted little time in asserting his dominance. From the opening bell, he backed Jones up with his powerful jab before unloading a ferocious barrage of punches. The assault ended with a series of clubbing right hands that floored Jones, bringing a swift conclusion in the very first round. It was another statement performance that showcased Lewis's devastating power and ability to finish fights quickly, further building momentum in his march toward bigger challenges. Fight 9, 14 April 1990 versus Michael Simuelu. Just 3 weeks later, Lennox Lewis was back in action at the prestigious Royal Albert Hall in London, facing Michael Simuelu of Zambia, who carried an impressive record of 18 wins, 2 losses, and 1 draw. On paper, this was one of Lewis's toughest assignments to date, but the Olympic champion once again proved a level above. From the outset, Lewis used his jab to measure the distance before detonating a perfectly timed left hook in the very first round. The punch landed cleanly and ended the contest on the spot, giving Lewis yet another emphatic early knockout victory as he continued to storm through the heavyweight ranks. Fight 10th. 9th of May 1990 versus Jorge Alfredo de Scola. Back at the Royal Albert Hall just under a month later, Lennox Lewis faced Argentina's Jorge Alfredo de Scola, who entered the ring with a respectable record of 14 wins and 3 defeats. De Scola was no stranger to tough competition. In his previous fight, he had gone 11 hard rounds with former WBA Heavyweight Champion Michael Dokes, a testament to his durability and toughness. But against the fast-rising Lewis, he wouldn't get that far. From the opening bell, Lewis pressed forward with his jab and heavy right hand, dictating the action. In the very last second of the opening round, Lewis uncorked a huge looping right hand that detonated flush and ended the fight instantly. Lewis added another brutal knockout to his growing resume, reinforcing the sense that Britain had a genuine heavyweight force on the rise. Fight 11, 20 May 1990 versus Dan Murphy. Just 11 days after his devastating knockout of Jorge de Scola, Lennox Lewis was back in action at City Hall, Sheffield. Originally scheduled to face Phil Brown, Lewis instead met late substitute Dan Murphy, who entered the fight with an experienced record of 26 wins, 4 losses, and 1 draw. Murphy had a reputation as a rugged fighter, and he did his best to withstand the early pressure. Lewis, however, was relentless, working behind his jab and mixing in heavy shots to the head and body. As the rounds wore on, Murphy began to fade under the sustained attack, particularly from Lewis's punishing body punches that continually broke him down. By the 6th round, Murphy was taking heavy punishment with little response, and the referee had no choice but to step in and wave off the contest. Lewis extended his unbeaten record with another dominant stoppage, showing his ability to systematically break down durable opponents as his climb toward championship contention continued. Fight 12, 27th June 1990, Royal Albert Hall, London. Lennox Lewis's 12th professional fight came against his most experienced opponent yet, Puerto Rican veteran Aussie Jaws Ocasio, who entered with a record of 22-9-1. Ocasio was no stranger to world-level competition. He had twice defeated Jimmy Young in the late 1970s, which earned him a shot at Larry Holmes for the WBC Heavyweight title in 1979. Though Holmes stopped him in 7 rounds, Ocasio went on to reinvent himself at cruiserweight. He captured the WBA World Cruiserweight Championship in 1982, making 3 successful defenses before losing the title to Piet Krause in 1984. Ocasio later challenged Evander Holyfield in 1986, losing by 11th round stoppage in a spirited effort. In 1987, he scored a notable career highlight with a split decision victory over Dwight Muhammad Qawi, further cementing his credentials as a tough, seasoned campaigner. Against Lewis, Ocasio used all his experience to survive, becoming the first man to take Lewis the distance as a professional. Lewis boxed behind his jab, stayed composed, and earned a clear points decision after 8 rounds. While it wasn't the explosive knockout the crowd had come to expect, it was a valuable test of Lewis's patience and ring control against a crafty veteran with world championship pedigree. Fight 13. 11 July, 1990. Superstars, Nightclub, Kitchener, Canada. Lennox Lewis returned to Canada for his 13th professional contest, taking on Mike Acey, who came into the fight with a respectable record of 11-4-1. Acey had previously faced rising contender Riddick Bowe, but that fight ended swiftly, with Acey being stopped in the very first round. Lewis, looking to make another statement, controlled the action from the outset. In the second round, he targeted the body with precision and power, landing 2 brutal body shots that left Acey unable to continue. The referee waved off the contest, giving Lewis another knockout victory, and further building his reputation as a destructive young heavyweight prospect. Fight 14, 31st October 1990, Crystal Palace, London. For his 14th professional bout, Lennox Lewis stepped in against Jean-Maurice Chanet, the reigning European heavyweight champion, who carried a solid record of 24-10 into the ring. This was seen as a significant test for Lewis, not only because of Chanet's experience, but also because it offered a glimpse of how close the young Brit was to fighting for continental honors. Lewis imposed himself from the opening bell, dictating the pace with his sharp jab and heavy combinations. Chanet tried to stay competitive, but Lewis's superior size, reach, and power gradually wore him down. By the 6th round, Chanet was suffering from a deep cut over his eye, forcing the referee to halt the contest and award Lewis the TKO victory. The win capped off a highly active year for Lewis in 1990, where he fought 8 times, remained unbeaten, and established himself as one of the most exciting heavyweight prospects in the world. With momentum firmly on his side, attention now turned to 1991, which promised a blockbuster showdown in the British heavyweight scene. 1991 was the year Lennox Lewis truly announced himself on the heavyweight stage. A year packed with explosive knockouts, ruthless European title defenses, and capped off by a huge all-British showdown that had the nation buzzing. The night Lewis staked his claim as Britain's next heavyweight star and captured the British title in devastating fashion. Fight 15, 6th March 1991, Wembley Arena, London. Lennox Lewis faced fellow Brit Gary Mason, who entered the fight with an imposing 35-0 record, 32 of those victories coming by knockout. Mason had been one of Britain's most feared heavyweights of the late 1980s, but his career had already been marred by a detached retina sustained in a bout with Everett Martin in 1990. After a short retirement, Mason returned in search of glory, with the European and British heavyweight titles on the line against Lewis. The fight itself was competitive in the early rounds, with Mason's power and experience keeping him in contention. However, Lewis fought with a calculated approach, consistently targeting Mason's vulnerable eye. By the 7th round, the damage was too severe, and the referee stepped in to halt the contest, awarding Lewis victory by TKO. It was a significant breakthrough win for Lewis. Not only had he handed Mason the first loss of his career, but he also cemented himself as Britain's new heavyweight star. Mason would attempt a short comeback in the United States, winning 2 more fights, but ultimately retired for good, his eye injury too serious to risk further punishment. For Lewis, this was just the beginning of his rise to the top of the division. Fight 16, 12 July 1991, Caesars Tahoe, Outdoor Arena, State Line, Nevada. Lennox Lewis crossed the Atlantic, taking on seasoned veteran Mike Weaver, who entered the bout with a record of 35-15-1. Weaver was no ordinary opponent. He was a former WBA heavyweight champion, having held the belt from 1980 to 1982. Although past his prime by the early 90s, Weaver remained dangerous and had only recently gone the distance in a tough 12-rounder against James Bone Crusher Smith in April 1990. From the opening bell, Lewis dominated with his sharp jab and superior athleticism, controlling the pace and keeping Weaver on the defensive. As the rounds progressed, Lewis began to open up with heavier shots, showcasing the raw power that was quickly earning him a reputation as one of the division's most feared punchers. In round 6, Lewis produced one of the most spectacular knockouts of his career to date. A perfectly timed, thunderous right hand crashed through Weaver's guard, sending the former champion down heavily and ending the contest instantly. It was a highlight reel finish and a statement victory on American soil. For Lewis, this was more than just another win. It was proof that he belonged among the world's elite heavyweights and was ready to chase world title glory. Fight 17, 30 September 1991, Royal Albert Hall, London. Lennox Lewis returned to the Royal Albert Hall to face fellow Brit Glenn McCrory, who entered the fight with a record of 28-6. McCrory was no stranger to success, having been the IBF Cruiserweight champion, before stepping up to the heavyweight division in search of new opportunities. However, the size and power gap between the two men was evident from the start, Lewis controlled the early action with his jab and rangy movement, keeping McCrory on the back foot. In round 2, Lewis unleashed a trademark thunderous right hand that McCrory simply couldn't withstand. The shot floored the former cruiserweight champion and forced the referee to step in, handing Lewis a decisive stoppage victory. It was another emphatic performance from Lewis, who showed once again that his combination of power, precision, and size was far too much for most opponents to handle. This win further cemented his growing reputation as Britain's leading heavyweight force. Fight 18, 23rd November 1991, Atlanta, Georgia. Lennox Lewis crossed the Atlantic once again, this time to Atlanta, Georgia, to face fellow Olympic gold medalist Tyrell Biggs, who entered the bout with a record of 19-4. Biggs had captured the super heavyweight gold medal at the 1984 Olympics, while Lewis had famously won gold in Seoul. Biggs was perhaps best known for challenging Mike Tyson for the undisputed heavyweight title in 1987, where he had some early success before ultimately being overwhelmed and stopped in round 7. Like many of Lewis's opponents around this period, Biggs had also recently faced Riddick Bowe, suffering an 8th-round stoppage defeat. Against Lewis, Biggs fared even worse. After a cautious start, Lewis's power and accuracy quickly took control. In round 3, Lewis turned up the pressure, flooring Biggs 3 separate times in the round with crushing shots. With Biggs unable to cope and clearly out of his depth, the referee stepped in to stop the contest. It was another dominant performance from Lewis, who once again showcased his frightening finishing ability. By the end of 1991, Lewis was rapidly establishing himself as a world-class heavyweight, and it was becoming clear that bigger challenges awaited him in the years ahead. Following a hugely successful 1991 campaign, where he claimed the British and European heavyweight titles and established himself as one of the most dangerous contenders in the division, Lennox Lewis entered 1992 with real momentum. His performances had not gone unnoticed. By the start of the year, Ring magazine rated him as the number 9 heavyweight in the world, a remarkable rise for a man just 3 years into his professional career. At the very top of the rankings sat the established names of the era: Evander Holyfield, Mike Tyson, Riddick Bowe, and Razor Ruddock. These were the fighters seen as the true kings of the heavyweight landscape, and the men Lewis needed to beat if he was ever to become a world champion. 1992 would prove to be a defining year. It was the year when Lennox Lewis stepped out from being viewed as a promising prospect and into the conversation as a genuine threat to the heavyweight throne. And he did it by scoring a crushing victory over one of the division's top 4 fighters, a win that shook up the entire heavyweight picture and announced Lewis as a legitimate world title contender. Fight 19, February 1st, 1992, Caesars Palace, Las Vegas. For his 19th professional contest, Lennox Lewis stepped onto the biggest stage of his career so far, Caesars Palace in Las Vegas. His opponent was Levi Billups, a durable American heavyweight with a record of 16 wins and 5 defeats. Billups was no pushover. He entered the fight off the back of an impressive unanimous decision victory over former WBA champion James Bone Crusher Smith. However, his career had also shown vulnerabilities. Just a few months earlier, in June 1991, he had been stopped in 3 rounds by the hard-hitting Michael Moorer. The fight marked Lewis's Las Vegas debut, a key milestone in his rise to international recognition. However, the performance itself was not one that thrilled the crowd. Lewis dominated the contest from start to finish, controlling the action behind his jab and never allowing Billups to get into range. But despite his clear superiority, Lewis was unable to break through Billups's guard or finish the fight inside the distance. After 10 one-sided rounds, the bout went to the scorecards, where Lewis was awarded a wide unanimous decision victory. While the win kept his unbeaten record intact, it was viewed as a somewhat disappointing outing, given the anticipation of a more explosive performance in his Vegas showcase debut. Still, Lewis had gained valuable experience, proving he could comfortably handle a tough, seasoned opponent over the full distance. Fight 20, April 30th, 1992, Royal Albert Hall, London. After making his Las Vegas debut earlier in the year, Lennox Lewis returned home to the Royal Albert Hall for one of the most significant fights of his career to date. Standing across the ring was fellow Brit Derek Williams, who entered with a record of 19-4 and held the Commonwealth heavyweight title. Williams was a solid domestic contender, but many felt he lacked the tools to truly trouble Lewis. His record already included 2 defeats to Jean-Maurice Chenet, a man Lewis had beaten convincingly in 1990 to claim the European crown. On this night, however, there was much more on the line than just the belts. With the British, European, and Commonwealth titles all at stake, Lewis had the opportunity to win the prestigious Lonsdale belt outright, a milestone achievement for any British fighter. The fight began cautiously, with the opening 2 rounds largely tactical, as Lewis worked behind his jab. But in the third, the momentum shifted dramatically. Lewis exploded with a devastating combination, landing 2 uppercuts, 1 from each hand, followed by a concussive right hand. Williams, unable to recover, was stopped for the first time in his professional career. The emphatic victory not only unified the 3 major titles under Lewis's control, but also elevated him further toward the world stage. By securing the Lonsdale belt outright, Lewis added his name to the history books of British boxing, while showcasing the kind of power and precision that marked him out as a future world champion. Fight 21, August 11, 1992, Atlantic City, New Jersey. Following his emphatic victory over Derek Williams to claim the British, European, and Commonwealth titles outright, Lennox Lewis traveled back across the Atlantic for what was very much seen as a keep-busy fight. His opponent was Mike Dixon, who entered with a record of 10-5. On paper, Dixon was not expected to trouble Lewis, but he did have some durability. He had gone the distance with both Corey Sanders and Bruce Seldon in his 2 previous outings, and had never been stopped. For Lewis, the fight came at a time when his reputation was quickly rising on the world stage. He was already ranked number 2 by both the WBC and WBO, and number 4 with the IBF and WBA, edging closer to a shot at the sport's biggest prizes. Once the bell rang, there was little doubt about the outcome. Lewis controlled the bout effortlessly, working behind his jab and imposing his size and power. Dixon was outgunned from the outset, gradually worn down under a steady barrage of punches. By the 4th round, with Dixon absorbing heavy punishment and offering little in return, the referee mercifully stepped in to wave the fight off. It was a dominant performance that reinforced Lewis's status as one of the top heavyweights in the world. Though not his toughest test, the victory showcased his discipline and consistency, keeping him sharp and perfectly positioned for the defining fight of his career that awaited just 2 months later. Fight 22, October 31st, 1992. Earl's Court Exhibition Hall, London. By late 1992, Lennox Lewis was no longer just the rising star of British boxing. He was on the verge of breaking into heavyweight superstardom. And to do so, he had to go through one of the most dangerous contenders of the era, Donovan "Razor" Ruddock. Ruddock was no ordinary opponent. In 1991, he had shared the ring twice with Mike Tyson in what were billed as eliminators for the undisputed heavyweight crown. In the first bout, Tyson had won by 7th round stoppage, a decision that Ruddock's camp fiercely protested as premature. The rematch, held just 3 months later, went the distance, with Tyson emerging victorious by unanimous decision. Despite back-to-back losses, Ruddock had proven his toughness, his trademark smash left hook, and his status as one of the most feared punchers in the division. With Tyson now out of the picture due to his conviction and imprisonment, Ruddock inherited the WBC #1 ranking. Lewis, the undefeated 1988 Olympic gold medalist, was ranked number 2. That set the stage for a massive showdown in London, with the winner guaranteed a crack at the victor of the upcoming Evander Holyfield vs. Riddick-Bowe title fight. The build-up was intense. At the press conference, Ruddock's promoter Murad Muhammad accused Lewis of using steroids, throwing extra spice into an already high-stakes matchup. The oddsmakers had Ruddock as the 2-1 favorite, and many believed the more seasoned contender would be too much for the relatively untested Brit. But when the bell rang, it was Lennox Lewis who announced himself as a true force in the heavyweight division. From the outset, Lewis used his thudding jab to dictate the pace and nullify Ruddock's offense. For almost the entire first round, he kept Ruddock off balance and unable to land his big shots. Then, with just 10 seconds left in the round, Lewis struck, unleashing a lightning-quick right hand that dropped Ruddock heavily to the canvas. Though Ruddock survived the count, the damage was clear. Lewis smelled blood. Early in the second, he cornered Ruddock and let loose a vicious combination that sent him down for the second time. Again, Ruddock beat the count, but Lewis was relentless. A third blistering barrage of punches floored Ruddock once more, and referee Joe Cortez immediately stepped in, waving the fight off. In just 2 rounds, Lennox Lewis had scored the biggest win of his career to date, a stunning knockout over a man considered among the world's most dangerous heavyweights. The victory was seismic. 2 weeks later, Riddick Bowe dethroned Evander Holyfield to become undisputed heavyweight champion. Per the agreement, Bowe's first defense was supposed to be against Lewis. But when negotiations broke down, most notably over a proposed 90-10 purse split, the fight collapsed. Bowe even went so far as to dump the WBC belt in a trash can at a press conference, refusing to fight Lewis. The WBC responded by awarding the title to Lewis, who had earned it the hard way in the ring. Lewis, for his part, mocked Bowe with the now infamous nickname Chicken Bowe. This was the night Lennox Lewis arrived as a world-class heavyweight, a destructive 2-round demolition that announced to the division and the world that the British champion was now a major player on boxing's biggest stage.